I'm not the kind of guy who buys into stories, legends, whispers. That's never been my thing. I've seen real things, hard things, things that leave marks. But that night, up in the Uintahs, it still gets to me. The fire was crackling, warm as could be. But the boy, he felt like ice. No wounds, no struggle. Just him and the flames. And no one's ever given me a real answer for what happened. Not science, not common sense, not even time. I'm Gary Mitchell. 68 years old, born and raised in Vernal, Utah. Spent 30-odd years strapped into EMT gear, running calls all over the Uintah Basin, snowstorms, wrecks, drownings, heart attacks. I retired a few years back, but still live here, on the same stretch of highway where I used to run patrol shifts with the medics. I know every pine ridge, canyon turn, even where the coyotes like to skulk after sundown. Near where I live is Flaming Gorge. Beautiful, sure, but deadly when winter sets in. Ice on the roads, sudden storms, and no cell signal half the time. We barely got cell towers up in the 90s. I'm talking big stretches of nothing. Keep your wits about you, or you risk being out there overnight with no help. Used to work with a small crew, 2 paramedics, driver, and me in the back. We had a beat-up ambulance, old but reliable until it wasn't. Winters meant running out on snowmobiles, 4-wheel drives, snow chains. We improvised a lot. Blankets from fire stations, extra oxygen tanks strapped to snow rigs. We saw it all. Hypothermia, frostbite, people out camping or breaking down in a storm. Never cared much for the old local legends. Folks here whisper about the Flaming Gorge Firewalker, a phantom figure who walks between campfires on starless nights, never making a sound. They say if you've got a fire out in the desert and someone looks like a man walking through the flames, don't trust what you see. It's said he leads folks deeper into the cold, away from warmth. Sounds like campfire ghost story stuff. I didn't pay it no mind. I'm a professional. Science, training, evidence, that's what I trusted. And hell, I've seen morbid things. People frozen to death beside campfires that had burned out. I never saw mirages. Never saw someone get halfway thawed while fire crackled. But what I'm about to tell you, something about it never added up. Back in February of 2005, I wasn't far from the end of my career. About 2 years shy of retirement. It was one of those brutal nights, wind coming down off the Uintahs like knives, snowdrifts already building on the roads. Temperature down well below zero. We got the call just before 6 p.m. Dispatcher said, possible exposure victim at remote camp, Flaming Gorge area. That's all. No cell ping, no details. We suited up. Pack full of blankets, heat packs, oxygen, IV kit. Ambulance couldn't make the road, so off to the snowmobile rigs. Ricky drove. I rode shotgun. 5 minutes in, visibility dropped. We stuck to memory trails. GPS was fickle up there. We rolled into a small clearing about a mile off the main snow road. A single campfire burned low, embers glowing orange, still crackling. Near the fire was a tent half collapsed under snow. No footprints, no gear scattered. Just that one spot with the fire still alive. I thought, survival. The fire must have been from earlier. Maybe someone wandered off and didn't make it back. Ricky kicked snow away. Under the embers I saw blackened logs, cooking pot overturned. But then I saw the figure, barely moving, slumped with arms tucked in, skin pale, lips blue. I thought he was dead. I climbed over and checked for pulse. Just faint. Breath shallow, lungs rattling. I couldn't believe what I saw. I pressed gloves to his chest, started oxygen. He was icy to the touch, like he'd been out in the blizzard naked. But how? That fire was crackling warm. Smoke curled upward. Heat rippled off stones around it. Yet, there he was, frozen. That's what stuck with me. See, hypothermia doesn't come that fast when there's fire right next to you. Not unless the heat wasn't warming him for long. Unless something was blocking it. I didn't say nothing then. We had work to do. We stabilized him. Wrapped him tight. Snowmobile ride back felt endless. He didn't speak, just stared into the night, eyes unblinking. On the ride to the hospital, my mind kept flipping through scenarios. Gear malfunction? No. Oxygen worked, radio worked. We recorded vitals, body temp under 78 degrees. He tested negative for drugs or alcohol. No medical history. Just camped by himself. I tried to make sense. He had blankets, sleeping bag, matches in his pocket. Still didn't make sense. Later at the hospital, we kept him stable. By morning, his temp rose, pulses steady. The kid survived, but he didn't open up much. Said he got lost, got cold, lost track. He didn't mention any weird lights or someone walking through flames, just that he blacked out. Within days, he checked out and disappeared. No follow-up, no names given. Something about it rubbed me wrong, always stuck in my chest. I wrote the report, filed the call, but the image of that fire, still burning, logs glowing, heat dancing, and him there frozen like he'd been hours in the blizzard, that haunted me. I shrugged it off as cold illusion, but around here, people still tell the flamewalker stories, that figure who walks between pits of burning wood, leading folks astray. Could have been a trick of light, mountain mirage. I kept telling myself, professional, no ghost stories. Yet, after that night, things started feeling off. I'd walk past my fireplace at home and get that same chill, like I'd seen someone out there moving in the flames. I wake some nights with sweat drips on my forehead thinking, what if something crossed my path and I didn't notice? I don't say any of this to get people riled up. I'm not about the supernatural. I'm just saying, what I witnessed didn't make sense. And maybe, just maybe, there's a reason those old campfire tales didn't die out. Not everything people whisper about in the dark is nonsense. Some of it, maybe it's rooted in something real. In all my years filling backpacks, driving out on calls, patching people together, I never expected that one moment would linger more than the wrecks, the drownings, the shootings I saw. Because this one, it didn't leave me with answers. It left me with a question that still echoes when the snow falls soft and the wind holds its breath. So that's me. Gary Mitchell, 68, EMT retired. Lived long enough to see what I thought was all there was, then bumped into something that defied sense in this world I know so well. And even now, years later, I can still feel the heat of that fire and the cold of that boy beside it. You gotta understand something about working out here in the basin. This ain't like Salt Lake or Denver. We didn't have 10 ambulances on standby or hospitals every 15 miles. It was me, Ricky, and sometimes another guy if we were lucky. That winter of 2005, we were covering over 200 square miles on shift. That's a whole lot of road, a whole lot of nothing, and not a lot of backup. Winters were hell. Roads turned to ice by sundown. Snow would dump down so hard you couldn't see past your hood. Sometimes we'd get stuck just trying to get to a call. I remember nights we'd chain up the tires, drive 5 miles an hour, praying we wouldn't slide off into a ravine. No cell towers up in the canyons back then. Radios cut in and out. And if you needed air support, good luck. Choppers wouldn't fly in that weather. Most of our calls were the same. Rollovers, carbon monoxide in campers, heart attacks in cabins way off grid. We knew the regulars. Folks who lived out past the paved roads. Ranchers too stubborn to move closer to town. Good people, just isolated. That isolation, it does something to you. You get used to quiet, to relying on yourself. Some nights on shift, I wouldn't hear a voice for hours except on the scanner. You drive and think and drive some more. It gets in your bones. I always tried to keep it light when we weren't on a call. Me and Ricky, we'd swap dumb jokes, argue about football, talk about coffee like it was fine wine. But under that, we both carried weight. You can't see what we saw and not carry some of it. Kids not breathing. Wives screaming in snowstorms. Men crushed under their own trucks trying to change tires. There ain't a manual that teaches you how to walk away from that stuff. You just fold it up and stick it somewhere inside. The cold added a whole other layer. You don't think about how fast it can turn on you until you're out there trying to keep someone alive while your fingers go numb through double gloves. Hypothermia creeps in quiet. We'd check victims and sometimes forget to check ourselves. I've seen Ricky get back in the rig with ice crusting on his beard, face red as a beet. We laughed it off, but it was serious business. And the locals, they told stories, sure, always have. I didn't give 'em much thought. Lot of talk about skinwalkers, lights in the woods, shadows you weren't supposed to follow. One guy out in White Rock swore his brother disappeared on a hunting trip 'cause he followed a voice out into the trees. I just chalked it up to booze, or trauma, or both. When folks live out there long enough, their minds start to stretch. The dark does that, but even if I didn't believe it, I heard it all the time, especially from the older folks. They said there's places you don't camp, places you don't start a fire. Old ground, they called it. Supposed to belong to things older than memory. Spirits, maybe. I didn't press. I respected their beliefs, but I didn't buy into them. Still, I'll admit, there were times we'd be out on a call and the woods would go too quiet. No wind, no animals, just stillness. That's when the hairs on my neck would stand up. Not from fear exactly, just from the sense that something was paying attention. Watching. I told myself it was just the mind playing tricks. We had one station, a trailer really, out near Manila. It was barely insulated. Heater rattled like an old washing machine, but we called it home during long shifts. There was a map on the wall with pins stuck in all the spots we'd run calls over the years. Red pins for trauma, blue for medical, black for DOA. One night I was looking at it, and I noticed a cluster of black pins near Flaming Gorge. I joked to Ricky, "That place sure likes to keep people." He didn't laugh. Routine in those days meant waking up in that trailer, eating cold breakfast sandwiches, and waiting for the call to come. We'd check the gear, do paperwork, clean blood from stretchers, refill saline bags. Then we'd wait. Some days we'd run 3 or 4 calls. Other days we'd stare out at falling snow and wonder if folks had just learned to stay inside. I think part of why that one night stayed with me so much is because it started just like the rest. Just another call, another cold victim. But it didn't feel that way when we got there. It didn't feel routine. It felt different. And out here, different usually ain't good. You do something long enough, you get a sense for when things are off. Not because of what's said, but because of what's missing. The dog that ain't barking, the wind that ain't blowing, the feeling that the woods are watching you back. That's the thing I can't shake. Not the kid we pulled out, not the cold in his bones. It's the fire. That damn fire, still burning like nothing was wrong, like someone had just been stoking it. But no prints, no boots, no wind pattern to explain why the snow hadn't snuffed it out. It's routine that gives you confidence out here. You count on it. But when routine breaks, when something don't fit, it makes you question everything. Every call you ever ran, everything you thought you understood about cause and effect, cold and heat, life and death. And that's what makes the doubt stick. Because that night, that wasn't routine, not by a long shot. It was a Friday, late February 2005. I remember that clearly because it was supposed to be my last shift before taking a week off to visit my daughter down in Cedar City. I'd packed the truck already, had a thermos of black coffee, extra gloves in the seat, even brought a damn book thinking maybe I'd get a quiet shift. Snow had started falling that morning, real fine, dry stuff, like powdered sugar. By noon it was coming down steady. Not a storm yet, but it was building. You could feel it in your teeth. The cold was tight, mean. That kind of cold that creeps under your skin no matter how many layers you got on. I was sitting in the rig with Ricky, eating beef jerky and bitching about the heater when the radio crackled to life. Dispatch was spotty that day, static all over. I had to lean in to catch it. Possible exposure victim, male, northern slope near Flaming Gorge, caller anonymous, dropped signal. That was it. No age, no name, no coordinates, just a vague location and a broken line. Didn't even know who called it in. Could have been a hunter, could have been a snowmobiler passing by. I remember looking at Ricky and he just sighed, like he already knew it wasn't going to be a clean run. Flaming Gorge. That area's tricky, beautiful in summer, hell in winter. It's got all these little side roads that disappear once the snow hits. GPS is useless. Trees too thick for a proper signal. And once you're off the road, you're on your own. We radioed back that we were heading out. Packed the usual. Thermal blankets, oxygen, Narcan just in case, hot packs, IV kit. Threw some extra fuel on the snow rig. We knew we'd need it. The drive up was quiet. Too quiet, actually. Normally you hear birds, wind whipping through trees, creaks and groans from the pines. That day, nothing. Just the hum of the snowmobile and the crunch of tracks behind us. I remember looking up at one point, and the sky was just flat. No sun, no color. Like we were trapped inside a gray sheet. Took us damn near 40 minutes to reach the ridge where the caller said they saw the campfire. We followed a trail barely visible. Someone had gone through earlier, maybe on foot, maybe not. Hard to tell. Wind was already covering whatever tracks there were. We found the camp down in a hollow surrounded by trees. One tent, one fire. That's all. Fire was low but still burning, crackling like someone had just added wood. There was this smell. Smoke, yeah, but something else too. Something sweet almost. Like old cedar, or maybe meat that had been cooked too long. Ricky noticed it too. Gave me a look, didn't say anything. We both just felt it. The weird part, no signs of anyone moving around. No fresh prints, no boots stomped into the snow, and the fire, well, it shouldn't have been burning that long without someone tending it. Not in that wind. We moved slow, careful. I called out, "Emergency services. Anyone here?" Nothing but the pop of the fire and the whisper of wind through trees. Then we saw him, slumped just past the fire, sitting upright, knees pulled to his chest like he'd been trying to warm himself. Young guy, early 20s maybe. Skinny, shaggy beard, coat zipped all the way up, but his hands were bare. I rushed over and dropped to my knees. First thing I noticed, his skin, pale, like porcelain, lips blue, fingers stiff. I reached for a pulse. Took a few seconds, but it was there. Weak, faint, breathing shallow, chest barely moving. He was alive. Barely. I called out to Ricky, "Get the O2, now," and started working. Laid him flat, checked airway, covered his hands with mine to get a little warmth going. I slipped an oxygen mask on, cranked it up. His body temp was bad, dangerously bad. But that didn't make sense. He was sitting right next to the fire, and that fire was putting out heat. I could feel it on my face. We've pulled people out of snowbanks before, but never someone frozen in front of open flames. I looked around, trying to piece it together. His pack was zipped, food untouched, water bottle half full, not frozen. That means he hadn't been out there too long, maybe a few hours at most. But his condition? It said otherwise. We wrapped him up, slipped hot packs under his arms, inside his coat, IV in his wrist. He flinched a little. That's when I knew he still had a shot. On the ride back, he didn't say a word. Eyes open, kinda glassy. He wasn't really there, just looking past us, like he was still in that hollow by the fire. We asked what happened. Nothing. Asked his name. Still nothing. We figured maybe shock, or maybe he'd taken something. But Talk's screen later came back clean. The weirdest moment came just before we loaded him onto the snow rig. I swear, I looked back at the fire one last time, and there was this shimmer, just for a second. Like heat waves, sure, but it felt different, like something moving through the flame. Not in front of it, through it. I blinked and it was gone. Didn't say nothing to Ricky. Figured I was tired, strung out, imagining things. But even now, sitting here years later, I can still see that shimmer. And I still can't explain why that kid was frozen stiff, with fire licking just inches from his boots. We pulled into that clearing just as the last bit of daylight was given up. You don't get real sunsets up there in the winter, just a slow fade to gray. Sky goes flat, trees turn into shadows, and the cold starts pushing in hard. I remember Ricky cutting the engine and that silence that followed. It was heavy, like the whole damn forest was holding its breath. The camp was maybe 20 yards ahead, tucked under a slope. Tent half buried in snow. A fire still burning low, with smoke trailing off like a whisper. And just to the left of it, the shape of a body. I stepped off the snowmobile and my boots sunk deep into the powder. Took a few slow steps, eyes locked on the figure. He was sitting on the ground, knees pulled to his chest, head drooped. For a second, I thought he was already gone. You see enough bodies, you can usually tell. There's a slackness when life's left. But there was something off here. His back was too stiff. His hands, bare hands, were locked together under his chin like he'd been praying or freezing in place. His coat was zipped, but there was ice crusting over his shoulders and hair. Ricky was right behind me, and I just said, "This ain't right." I knelt down, put 2 fingers to his neck. Pulse was there, but thready, barely. His face, man, I won't forget it. Eyes were open just a crack. Skin pale, like wax. Lips cracked. I'd seen hypothermia before, plenty of times, but never this close to an open flame. Ricky was already pulling the kid open. I yelled, "Get the O2. We gotta warm him fast." I started peeling open hot packs, shoved him under his armpits, down his back, wherever I could. We wrapped him in the emergency blanket, then another. Hooked up the oxygen. Still no response. I kept talking to him, like that might help. "Stay with us, buddy. You're all right now. We got you." But he didn't blink, didn't twitch. Just that shallow breath, slow and rattly. Now here's the thing. I could feel the heat from the fire on my left side. It wasn't out. It wasn't embers. It was damn well still alive. We were close enough I had to shift so the smoke wouldn't hit my eyes. And yet, this kid looked like he'd been sitting in a freezer for hours. I stood up and looked around. No tracks, no gear scattered. Just the one pack, zipped up and dry, sitting near the tent. No sign he'd been moving around. And the snow around him, undisturbed, clean. That didn't sit right. If he'd been shifting, trying to stoke the fire, there'd be some footprints. Drag marks, something. But there was nothing. The tent looked unused, just there. Half covered in snow. We didn't touch it, didn't feel right. I don't know why, just one of those gut things you get after years of seeing too much. Ricky said, "We gotta move. Storm's coming in." He was right. You could feel it changing. Wind picking up. Sky darkening real fast. We hoisted the kid up. He was light, too light, and strapped him to the sled board. Covered him with 2 more blankets and checked vitals again. Still barely holding on, but no better. We started back slow. Maybe 15 minutes into the ride, I looked back. This part's hard to say without sounding nuts, but I swear, I saw movement by the fire. Just a flicker, like someone stepping past. No form, no face. Just a shift, a shadow through the smoke. Could have been wind, I guess. Could have been the way heat distorts air. But it felt wrong. Like something was lingering there, watching us leave. I didn't say anything to Ricky. Hell, maybe I didn't want to say it out loud. Felt like giving it power, you know? When we got back to the ambulance, we had to work fast. His core temp was 77. That's dead territory, but he was still breathing. We got the IV in, started warm fluids. I kept checking his eyes. No change. But I'll never forget the way he smelled. Not like death. Not even like cold sweat or blood or campfire. It was like cedar and burnt plastic. Faint, but there. The whole drive to the hospital, I kept thinking about that fire, about how it didn't add up. I could still feel the heat from it on my jacket, but that boy, he might as well have been sitting in an ice chest. It made no sense. None of it. Later at the hospital, he started coming back around, little by little. But he wouldn't talk. Not to me, not to the nurses. He stared at the ceiling like he was waiting for something. I asked him once when it was just me in the room, "You remember what happened out there?" He turned his head slow, looked at me, didn't say a word, just blinked, once, and turned away. We didn't waste time. Once we got him strapped to the sled, every minute felt like it was ticking louder than the last. Hypothermia ain't like a regular injury. You don't get much warning. Once they're that cold, your window to save them shrinks real fast. And this kid, he was already on the edge. You could feel it. We got him loaded into the back of the rig. Ricky took the wheel and I climbed in with him. Soon as the doors shut, the world went quiet. Just the low hum of the engine and my own breath in that tight space. I remember thinking it felt like a coffin in there. Cold, cramped, no sound but his shallow breathing. I started with warm IV fluids. We had him heated best we could, tucked under blankets near the floor vent of the station. Not perfect, but better than nothing. I found a vein in his wrist. Tough to get in. Skin was tight, like trying to stick a needle in leather. Finally got it, hooked up the line. Watched it drip. Slow, steady. He didn't flinch. I kept talking to him. "You're all right, son. Stay with me. Just a bit longer." His eyelids twitched once. That was all. No movement in his hands. No attempt to talk. Next, I checked his vitals again. Temp was still real low. Pulse weak, barely there. I pulled out a bag of hot packs and tucked them down by his feet, under his arms, anywhere skin was close to the surface. We wrapped him tighter with the emergency foil blankets, tried to trap any body heat he had left. Still no response. Now, most hypothermia cases, you'll see some shivering. Even when they're out cold, the body tries to fight. But this kid, he wasn't shivering. He wasn't twitching. He just laid there, like he'd given up hours ago. That's when I started feeling uneasy. Not just because of how cold he was, but because of how calm he looked. His face wasn't twisted in pain, no signs of panic. It was still, peaceful even. And that ain't right for someone fighting for their life. Ricky called back from the cab. "Road's slick. Gonna be a bit longer." I remember nodding, though he couldn't see me. I kept working. At some point I leaned in, real close, just trying to see if I could get through. I whispered, "What the hell happened to you out there?" He blinked. Slow. Like someone waking up from a deep sleep. That one blink, hell, I almost dropped the oxygen mask. "Hey, you hear me?" I leaned closer. He opened his eyes, just a sliver. Looked at me. I swear, right then, his lips moved. Just barely, like he was trying to say something. I leaned in, ear almost touching his mouth. I think, he whispered. It wasn't the cold. Then his eyes shut again. I sat back, heart thumping. Thought maybe I imagined it. Maybe I was hearing what I wanted to hear. But something in the way he said it, hell, it stuck with me. Still does. It wasn't the cold. I didn't know what that meant. Still don't. But it rattled me. The rest of the ride felt like hours. I kept checking vitals. No change. No crash, thank God. But no improvement either. He was hovering in that in-between space. Barely alive. Not quite slipping away. We pulled up to the ER just past 8 p.m. Nurses were waiting at the bay door with a gurney. We got him out fast. I gave him the rundown. Male, early 20s, hypothermic, unresponsive but breathing, pulse weak, IV started, oxygen given. They nodded, wheeled him off. That should have been the end of it. Usually is. But I didn't leave right away. I stood there, outside the ambulance, breath fogging in the cold, staring at the doors he'd just gone through. I couldn't shake it. The fire still burning. The way his body hadn't made sense. The way he said it wasn't the cold. I'd run dozens of cold exposure cases. Hunters falling through ice, hikers caught in sudden snow squalls, even drunks passing out in parking lots overnight. This wasn't like any of those. This kid had resources, he had gear, he had heat, and yet he came out of that woods like death had touched him, and he never said a word about how or why. I went inside, asked the nurse if I could check back in on him after they stabilized him. She said sure, long as I stayed out of the way. I waited in the hallway. Half an hour passed, then an hour. Finally they let me in. He was still, breathing, hooked up to warmers and monitors, eyes closed. But something in that room felt off. You ever walk into a place and feel like you weren't alone, even though it's just the two of you? That's what it felt like. I sat next to him for a few minutes, just watching, listening to the beeps, thinking about that fire, that smell, that shimmer. Then I got up, patted his blanket once and walked out. Didn't tell the nurses what he said. Didn't tell Ricky either. Just kept it tucked inside where it still sits. I've been to more scenes than I can count. Crashes, cardiac arrests, drownings, you name it. Some of them stay with you a while, sure. Faces mostly. Screams. But this one? It's not the kid's face that haunts me. Not even the way he looked half dead sitting next to a living fire. It's the fire itself. That's what gets me. That damned fire was burning, and I don't mean some old ember flickering. I mean it was crackling, steady, throwing out real heat. You get close to it, and your cheeks warmed right up. Ricky and I both felt it. That fire was alive, and he was sitting right there, not more than 2 feet away from it. Frozen stiff. Lips blue, skin waxy, fingers curled up like a dried leaf. I've never seen that. Never. I kept going back over it in my head. I thought maybe the fire had just been relit. Maybe someone came by, saw him, tossed in wood, and ran off. But we saw no tracks. No boots in the snow, no fresh drag marks, no nothing. And the logs, damn, I remember that clear. They weren't fresh. They were half-burned, glowing red inside. You could tell they'd been burning a while, long enough for heat to reach a person sitting close. It made no sense. You work this job long enough, you start seeing patterns. Trauma's got a rhythm. Exposure follows rules. If someone's body temp drops, there's always a chain of logic behind it. Wind chill, wet clothes, no shelter. But this kid? He had shelter. He had layers. He had a fire. So why was he nearly dead? And then there was that smell. I didn't mention it to the hospital staff. Didn't know how. I wouldn't even know how to describe it right. It wasn't decay. Wasn't blood or urine or smoke. It was more like old cedar and something acrid. Sweet but sharp. I smelled it near the fire and again in the back of the rig. Even faint in the ER. Not strong, just enough to make the hairs on my arms rise. Couple nights after the call, I went back over the paperwork. Tried to write it straight. Male, approx, 22 years old, found hypothermic at backcountry camp near Flaming Gorge. Fire still active at time of arrival. No signs of struggle, no trauma. IV fluids, O2, stabilized and transported. That's what I wrote. I didn't write that he whispered it wasn't the cold. I didn't write about the shimmer I saw in the firelight when we were packing up. I sure as hell didn't write that it felt like someone, or something, was watching us. But I remember every bit of it. See, there's stories around here. Old ones. I used to laugh 'em off. Still kinda do, I guess. But I've heard 'em. You spend any time in the Uintahs, you hear about the firewalker. They say he moves between campfires in the winter woods. Doesn't leave prints, doesn't speak. Just walks right through the flames. Locals say if you see him, you better not look away. Or you'll forget where you are. Walk off into the trees, even if you're warm. They say the fire don't help if he's already found you. Some folks say he's just a tale made up to scare kids. Others say he's something older, something that comes when the cold's just right and the wind's dead still. Now, I ain't saying I believe any of that. I'm a practical man. Always have been. But after that night, I don't shrug it off quite like I used to. What sticks with me is the timing. That fire should have saved that kid. No question. It was hot enough to melt snow a few feet around it. I checked, but his clothes weren't damp. His boots weren't warm. His skin felt like he'd been out in a snowdrift for hours. That just don't compute. And the way he looked at me in the rig, eyes wide open, unfocused, like he was watching something I couldn't see. I don't think he ever really saw me. I think his mind was still back in that hollow, sitting by that fire. I've tried to find him since. Called the hospital a few weeks later. Nurse said he checked himself out the day after he stabilized. Gave no name. Just walked out. Left his discharge papers on the bed. No family, no ID, no trace. I asked Ricky if he thought any of it was strange. He shrugged and said, "Folks do weird things in the cold." That's all he gave me. He didn't want to talk about it. Maybe he saw something too, maybe not. I didn't push, but I can't let it go. I've even gone back to the site, just once, about a year later. Snow had come early that season, thick and deep. I hiked out on foot, followed our GPS track from the original call. Took me damn near half a day to find the spot. When I did, the fire ring was still there, blackened rocks, char stains on the snow-covered earth, but no sign of anyone else. The tent was gone, no trash, no tracks, just silence. And I swear, when I stood there, looking at that circle of stones, I felt warm. Not just body heat, not just from moving around. It was like the air shifted, just enough for me to notice. I left quick. Didn't tell anyone, not even my wife. I don't think it was fear exactly. It was something else. Like whatever happened out there wasn't mine to touch anymore. Like I'd stepped into something I wasn't supposed to understand. And that's what keeps me up some nights. Not the kid, not the cold. The fact that after all these years, all this experience, there's still one thing I saw that doesn't fit anywhere. No report, no manual, no science. Just a fire that should have saved him, and a cold that came anyway. After that night, I went back to work like nothing happened. That's how it goes in this line of work. You get back in the rig, check your gear, run the next call. No time to dwell. No one's handing out medals for sitting around wondering what the hell just happened. You push it down, file it away. But this one, I couldn't file it. I'd catch myself thinking about it during the quiet hours. Flipping through paperwork, making coffee, driving back roads alone. Didn't matter. That image of him sitting next to the fire kept coming back. Skin white, eyes glassy, like he'd already left his body. And yet, breathing, alive. Barely. I told myself maybe I missed something. Maybe there was a medical reason, some rare condition, or a drug that don't show up on standard tox screens. Maybe the fire had just gone low before we got there, and the heat hadn't reached him in time. But I knew better. I was right there. That fire was on. I could feel it on my face. I smelled the smoke. The logs were red hot. And still, the kid was frozen stiff. What stuck with me the most wasn't just the physical part. It was the silence. The way he looked through me in the rig. The way he didn't flinch, didn't fight. Most people in his state would be gasping, twitching, mumbling nonsense. Not him. It was like he knew he'd made it out, but wasn't sure why. Or maybe he didn't want to. I don't know. And then there's that line. It wasn't the cold. He didn't say much, just that. But it's been ringing in my ears ever since. I've replayed it 1,000 times. What the hell did he mean? What else could it have been? It ain't like I've never dealt with the strange before. People under stress see all kinds of things. Panic does weird stuff to the brain. Cold messes with your senses. I've seen guys hallucinate. I've seen them rip their clothes off in sub-zero weather, swearing they're burning up. The human mind breaks in all kinds of ways. But this wasn't that. This wasn't delusion. It was something deeper. The kind of thing that sticks in your gut and don't leave. After he checked out of the hospital, I tried to track him down. No name on the charts, just John Doe. Said he walked out quietly, left behind the discharge papers, didn't say a word to the staff. That's rare. Most folks at least wait for someone to pick them up. But not him. Gone. I kept the run sheet from that night. Still got it. Tucked in an old folder in my garage. Most reports I forget within a week. This one, I can recite every line, every box checked, every word I wrote. Sometimes I wonder if I should have pushed more, asked more questions, followed up harder. But what would I have done, really? What do you say to someone who might have seen something you don't even believe yourself? Ricky never talked about it again. I asked him once, maybe 2 weeks later, if anything struck him strange. He just said, "Cold does funny things," and that was it. Shut it down. I could tell he didn't want to go there. And honestly, maybe I didn't either. But it stayed with me. I started having dreams. Not full nightmares, but weird, unsettling stuff. Always snow, always fire. Sometimes I'd see a figure just beyond the flames. Never clear, just motion. Like a person standing still, staring. Sometimes I'd wake up feeling cold, even though the house was warm. Wife said maybe I was just carrying the job too long. You've seen too much, Gary. That stuff don't go away. She was right. It don't. I finally retired 2 years after that call. Thought maybe walking away from it would give me peace. And in some ways it did. I stopped running calls. Stopped seeing fresh blood, fresh faces. But the old ones stayed. Especially that one. Sometimes I'll be sitting on the porch at night, looking out at the woods behind my place. Cold creeps in around October, and I'll see the frost gather on the railing, feel that stillness settle in. And every now and then, I swear I smell that same strange scent, like cedar and burnt plastic, just faint on the wind. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's my mind digging it up again. But I don't move. I just sit there and let it pass. Truth is, I ain't scared of what happened. I'm just unsettled. Like I brushed up against something I wasn't supposed to understand. Like I got a glimpse of a rule breaking, and the world never quite looked the same after. I don't go out to Flaming Gorge much anymore. Used to fish there, camp with buddies. But after that call, I lost the taste for it. You get the feeling that some places ain't meant to be disturbed too long. Some fires ain't meant to be stared at. That's what stuck with me. Not just the cold, not just the silence. It was the sense that something else had been there. Something that didn't want to be seen, but made damn sure it was felt. I've had a lot of time to think about it. You get older, you slow down. Things you used to be too busy to dwell on, they start knocking at your door. Quiet hours, long drives, sitting out back with a beer. It all bubbles up eventually. And that night, that boy, that fire, it still comes back to me. Not every day, but often enough. Sometimes it's a sound, like dry wood popping. Sometimes it's just a feeling, like someone's watching me from just outside my line of sight. I ain't saying I believe in ghosts or spirits or any of that, but I do believe some things leave a mark. Not always one you can see. Sometimes it's just a question that never gets answered. What eats at me isn't fear. I ain't scared of what I saw. I'm bothered by the fact that I can't explain it. I was trained to understand what happens to the body, how cold kills, how to save someone when time's running out. I trust procedures, trust logic, spent my life in that world, and it's worked. Until that night. Now, I don't go around telling this story to folks. You start talking like this in town, they look at you sideways. Old Gary's lost a step. Maybe they're right. Maybe I've just let it stew too long, but I don't think so. I think it stayed with me because deep down, I know what I felt. That fire should have kept him alive. It was hot. I felt it myself. We were less than a few feet away. But that boy, he was cold like the fire wasn't even there. I've run through the science. Maybe his blood pressure dropped too fast. Maybe his body shut down before the fire got going. Maybe he'd been wet earlier and we missed the signs. Could be. But then there's that whisper. It wasn't the cold. That line plays in my head like a loop. What else could it have been? Some nights I wonder if he saw something out there, if he felt something I couldn't. I think about the way he looked, not panicked, not scared, just empty, like something had pulled all the emotion out of him and left a shell behind. That's what really sticks, that emptiness, that silence. And sometimes, when I let myself go there, I start thinking, maybe the stories ain't all just tall tales. Maybe those old folks talking about the firewalker or whatever you want to call it. Maybe they saw something once too, something they couldn't explain. And instead of trying to break it down like a paramedic would, they just wrapped it in a story and passed it down. I used to roll my eyes at that stuff, still do sometimes, but it don't roll off me like it used to. I guess what I'm trying to say is, sometimes the job ain't just about what you save. It's about what you carry afterward. And this one came home with me. It crawled into that quiet part of me where I keep the things I don't talk about. I never told my wife the whole thing. Just said we pulled a kid out of the cold and he made it. That's true. But I left out the parts that didn't make sense. Not because I didn't trust her. I just didn't know how to say it without sounding like a fool. And honestly, I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. You tell yourself over the years that every call is just another puzzle. Solve it. Move on. But what do you do when the pieces don't fit? When the picture you end up with don't make sense? That's what I've been sitting with. And the weirdest part? I'm not sure I want the answer anymore. What if it really wasn't the cold? What if something else was out there that night? Something we don't have a name for? Something that moves in the spaces we don't see? I ain't saying it was paranormal. I'm just saying I've never found a good reason for what happened. And that, more than anything, is what's hard to live with. I saved that boy's life. I know that. But I don't know what I pulled him out of. I don't know what I interrupted. And that's a strange thing to carry. Most calls, you walk away with closure. Sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's hard, but there's usually a beginning, middle, and end. Not this one. This one's still open, still waiting to be finished. And maybe it never will be. If you're still watching this, I guess that means you've stuck with me this far. So, thank you. I don't tell this story to just anybody. Matter of fact, I've never really told it all the way through like this. Not even to my family. I think I just needed to let it breathe. Needed to stop carrying it around like it didn't weigh nothing. Truth is, it does. That night, it didn't just end when I handed that kid off to the ER team. It stayed with me, changed something. I don't mean in some big dramatic way like I quit life and became a monk or nothing. But it left a crack in the wall I used to keep between me and the things I couldn't explain. And now, I think I'm all right with that crack being there. You spend your whole career looking at life like a checklist. A set of steps. Scene safe, ABCs, vitals, transport. That structure, it keeps you steady. Keeps you from falling apart when things get ugly. But some things ain't meant to be measured like that. Sometimes you run a call, and what you bring back with you ain't just a patient. It's a question, a shadow, a memory that won't sit down and be quiet. That's what this was for me. I ain't here to convince you of anything. I don't know what happened out there in the snow that night. I just know that it wasn't normal, and it wasn't nothing I was trained to handle. It fell outside the edges of what I thought I understood, and I guess I've learned to live with that. There's folks out there who've seen things too. I know it. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you've got your own story sitting in the back of your mind, never told it because you figured no one would believe you. Or maybe you just didn't know how to say it out loud. Well, I'm telling you now, I believe you. I might not know what you saw, might not know what it meant, but I believe that feeling of, this ain't right, that chill that don't come from the air, that quiet that feels too heavy. And I think there's value in saying it out loud, not because it solves anything, but because it makes you feel a little less alone in it. I've spent years replaying that night. I've looked at it from every angle, tried to pull it apart, find the flaw in the logic, the thing I missed, and maybe there is something I missed. Maybe it's all explainable and I just couldn't see it. But here's the part that keeps me up sometimes. I don't think I want to explain it anymore. I think there's some peace in letting mystery be mystery, in respecting the parts of life that don't fit in a box. That's not weakness. That's wisdom, maybe. Comes with age. Comes with losing enough folks, saving others, and watching the line between them get thinner over time. So if you're someone who's been carrying a strange memory, if you've ever had a moment that didn't make sense but felt realer than anything else, talk about it, even if it's just to yourself. Even if it's just sitting out on your porch with a cup of coffee, saying it under your breath. Give it a name. Give it space. That's how you stop it from rotting inside you. And if you feel like sharing, leave a comment. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be detailed. Just say, yeah, I had something like that once. That's enough. 'Cause we're not alone in this. Not really. There's more of us out there than you'd think. People who saw something, felt something, walked away confused and quiet, but kept it buried 'cause that's what we were taught to do. Well, I'm done burying this one. That boy lived. I'm grateful for that. I did my job. But that fire, that hollow, that cold that shouldn't have been, I'll carry that the rest of my days. And maybe now that I've told it, maybe I'll sleep a little easier. Maybe not. But either way, I'm glad I finally said it out loud. Thanks for listening.